Welcome in. It is Big Ten Today on a Wednesday. We are presented by Gatorade. Great to have you with us here and really excited to talk Big Ten football with you in the next hour. It should be fun. It is made much more fun by the fact that I get to do it with Ashley Adamson. Ashley, this is a huge week. It is a day that we have had circled on the calendar for quite some time. Oregon, Ohio State, got to be fired up.
I'm so fired up. And as always, Dave, this is the best hour of my week, is hanging out with you on Wednesdays. So I'm excited to hear what Will Howard has to say, too. Looking forward to that.
It does make me question the rest of your week, but I always look forward to it as well. Let's get into Oregon and Ohio State. That is our big story. The Buckeyes come in ranked second. The Ducks are third. It is the first ever matchup of top five teams in the nearly 60-year history of Autzen Stadium. Both teams are 5-0. Both have dazzling skill position talent. Both boast stingy defenses. Ohio State picked first in the unofficial Big Ten preseason poll. Oregon second. Massive stakes and implications.
You get to control your own destiny because you're playing the best teams in the league on our schedule, and so that part's great. Every time you're playing one of these teams, you're fighting for an opportunity to go to Indianapolis, and that's important. So there's that part of it. Then there's obviously the playoff scenario. So a lot at stake this weekend, which is exactly the way we want it.
I'm confident in our players. I like our team. I like the guys that we get the opportunity to go out there and play with. I think our guys play competitive ball. This will certainly be the best challenge for every single position on our team this week. Obviously you come to a place like Oregon to play in big-time games, and this is one of those opportunities, but to get to be a part of big-time atmospheres as well, and certainly this is one of those.
It is indeed just a massive game in so many ways. I do think it's a little different, Ashley. Actually, I would say it's significantly different in a 12-team playoff world. I mean, both of these teams know you can afford to lose one. You can probably afford to lose two games and still make it into the college football playoff. That being said, you come at this having covered Oregon for many years for the Pac-12 networks. I want to defer to you on this. What do you think's at stake for the Ducks?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I'm curious to get your opinion if you think it's anything different for Ohio State, but in general, I mean, these are the games, you heard coaches say it, like these are the games that players dream of getting to experience. It is a massive opportunity to have the attention of the entire college football world, not to mention a ton of NFL scouts and, every CFP committee member watching. There will be many great meetings between these programs in the coming years. We know that. But the first one in league play, I think Oregon has a chance to truly, announce its arrival into the league. Anyone who knows Oregon knows the name Herb Yamanaka. He's like an institution in Eugene. He's worked there since he graduated in the 50s. I think he just recently celebrated his 90th birthday. He has lived Oregon football for the last 7 decades. He's had every job you could imagine, ticket sales, fundraising, concessions. And according to Herb, he told Rob Mullins, the AD, that this game against Ohio State is hands down the biggest home game in program history. So you don't need to take it from me that this is huge. Take it from Herbie. Saturday will be very special. And yes, while it's not a playoff elimination game by any stretch, there is a lot at stake. So I'm curious if you think there's anything different for the Buckeyes coming in. The pressures may be a little different.
I think they have more pressure on them than Oregon does. And again, I think the pressure on Ohio State isn't necessarily for this game. Like, is there more at stake in this game for Ohio State than there is for Oregon? I don't necessarily think that's true, and I think it's hard to parse that out. But I guess I would just say there's more at stake in this season, I think, for Ohio State than there is really for any team in college football. For Ohio State, it very much is a national championship or bust mentality. I think most years, I just think that is the reality of the Ohio State job. I think it has been intensified, like let's just call it what it is, by the fact that their arch rival Michigan passed them. They've won 3 straight games against the Buckeyes. They won the national championship last year. And I just think there's inherently a lot of pressure on you when you tell the world that you went out and spent $20 million on your football team. Like, you kind of have to get it right. So is there more pressure in this game? I don't know. But I think to do the things that Ohio State wants to do this year, there's more pressure on them to win this game because if you win this game, it gives you the inside track to Indianapolis, which if you win that game gives you a chance or almost certainly would give you a bye in the first round of the college football playoff, which means you're more rested as you head into the meat of that playoff. So again, is there more at stake Saturday? I don't know, but is there more at stake broadly? I will admit, coming at this from a perspective of having followed Ohio State a lot longer than I followed Oregon, but my gut tells me there is, Ashley.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. And I think one of the things that I'm excited about is just, again, we go back to the opportunity to have a game day environment like this. Autzen Stadium is one of the best places to watch a game. I tell every football fan, like, you got to go there at least once. They got an awesome fan base. It's a lot like other college towns in that the university's athletic department is the entertainment hub. It's the show that everything sort of orbits around. And when I was talking to Rob Mullins, the athletic director this week, he said, these are the opportunities that you hope for. You know, this is the biggest demand he said he's seen for tickets in the 15 years he's been with the Ducks. No surprise to you, Dave, I'm sure. Like, people are coming out of the woodwork this week looking for tickets. And even if you can get a ticket, by the way, the hotels have apparently been sold out for a 50-mile radius for months. So ultimately, I think as we, maybe dive into the matchup a little bit, that's a key part of this. Everyone has been talking about this game for months, and Dan Lanning and Ryan Day have had to keep each of their teams focused each week. So there's a sense, I imagine, for both teams like, okay, we're finally here. The opponent can have our full undivided attention, and we get to actually play the game that everyone has been buzzing about since the schedule actually came out.
Yeah, it's funny. I had several conversations when I visited Eugene this summer. Rob Mullins among them, Drew Maringer, the tight ends coach, talked to Will Stein this summer as well. And kind of the same thing you're saying. I mean, this was months ago, Ashley, and we focused a lot of our conversation in various points on this game. I mean, this game has been circled on everyone's calendar. So what interests you about the game? I mean, I do think Autzen's a huge part of it. Like, you don't lose one home game in 6 years by mistake. Like, it's a huge advantage for Oregon, no doubt. I think one thing that really interests me about this game is I can't point to an obvious weakness on either team. Like, I was concerned about Oregon up front, certainly at the beginning of the year, on the offensive line and maybe to a lesser extent in the run game. I think they've answered some of those questions. I do think Ohio State seems to be a little bit better there, but not dramatically so. Like, there's no matchup that I look at and say, well, this one grossly favors one team or the other. And there's no matchup to me that seems like strength against weakness or vice versa. It just feels like these are two really good, well-rounded football teams.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I do think we're about to find out if Oregon has truly fixed their offensive line troubles. That unit has looked a lot better the last 2 weeks. I think it's a good sign that Jordan James really came alive in that game against the Spartans on Friday. But as you know, I do think that Ohio State's front seven is just a different animal. Like, last week, you see what the Buckeyes did with Caleb Johnson. They held him in check. It was the first time he was held under 100 rushing yards all season. He finished with half the yards that he normally gets. So will Jordan James get it going? Will Dylan Gabriel be able to pick his spots and use his legs in critical moments? And then I think there's, the Chip Kelly element is great too. A guy who helped build Oregon football into what it is, coming back as the opposing OC. He has never won a game as an opponent at Autzen. He went 0-3 in Eugene when he was at UCLA. So I do think both OCs, Chip Kelly and Will Stein, will have some new wrinkles that we haven't seen. But neither of these offenses, have to get cute to win this game. So I think it'll come down to as it usually does in the trenches. But the last thing, Dave, I would say that I'm curious about is how much the first 5 games prepared both of these teams. Oregon had to pull some rabbits out of their hat against Idaho and Boise. They've been punched in the mouth and they have responded. Ohio State has steamrolled everyone. Iowa hung for a bit, but, they've won every single game by 4 touchdowns. So I wonder if the experience of playing in a tight game will benefit the Ducks if this game actually goes down to the wire.
I don't think Ohio State's non-conference schedule helped them in any way. And we've talked about this. I mean, they have a much more difficult non-conference schedule. They have marquee games coming up every year here going forward. But to your point, I mean, again, Boise State, they had the best running back in the country, arguably, in Ashton Genty. I do think maybe that helped expose some flaws in Oregon, which then you address here in the subsequent weeks. I am interested to see how Ohio State's offensive line holds up. I mean, because that felt like the weakness or the question mark with the Buckeyes as well. And much like Oregon's, it's been really good. I mean, I think Ohio State's has been more consistent than Oregon's. But Oregon's defensive front, Ash, is no joke. I mean, Jordan Birch is phenomenal. They've got a ton of talent on that group. Uyunglele has been great. So I do think, again, I think Ohio State, like kind of on paper and maybe based on what we've seen, although to your point, it's hard to judge the competition. I think they've been incrementally better at most positions, not every position, but most positions. But again, what they will look like when they face like talent, I think that's the big question mark in this game. And then, as you say, it just comes down to a few big plays here and there.
Yeah, and I do think it is worth pointing out, too, the Ducks got an extra day to prepare. They played Michigan State last Friday. The Buckeyes have to travel, so that's a factor. I think what's crazy, though, Dave, in this current world of the expanded CFP, I was thinking about this. This could be the first of 2 or maybe 3 times that these two teams could play this season.
Yeah.
Like there's a world in which that happens. So,
yeah, in fact.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to being on our 6th piece of pizza on Saturday night watching this one with you.
If you look back at the preseason prognostications of the Big Ten, this was chosen by the media in the unofficial poll as the Big Ten championship game. So the belief was that these two teams would meet twice. And as you say, a very real possibility that you could even meet 3 times. So it should be fascinating, yes, and it should be a lot of fun. The green room will be hopping, that is for sure, coming up on Saturday. Lots more to come on our show. Our game leaders, fueled by Gatorade. Will Howard off to a great start as Ohio State's QB, tied for first in the conference in terms of TDs responsible for. That includes 4 on the ground. Also in the top 3 in the Big Ten in terms of yards per attempt and completions of 30 and 40 yards. He is 8th in the nation in passing efficiency. And Ohio State quarterback Will Howard joining us now. He is today's big interview. Will, really appreciate your time. I've got to say, I have been fired up about this game for quite some time, and my level of involvement will be watching it on television and then talking about it. So I can only imagine, what are the emotions that you are feeling as you head towards this first mammoth matchup of the year?
Man, I'm excited. It's a big matchup. We know that, it's been circled for a while, and, I think a lot of people expected us to be going into this game pretty highly ranked, and it's a 2-3 matchup, man. It's what you dream about when you're a kid. It's why you come to a place like Ohio State. So, man, I'm fired up. I can't wait to get out there and strap them up. It's going to be a fun one.
Well, you have started in some big games. I mean, you played in a conference championship game and won at Kansas State when you were in the Big 12. But again, I do think there's a different level in this game. This is the one game in the country that everyone is talking about this week. How do you feel the difference in the magnitude?
Yeah, it's definitely a big game. We're trying not to make it too big or anything like that, and we're trying not to change anything. But we understand the magnitude of this one, and we know how much this means to this fan base, and we know how many people are going to be watching. But like I said, man, we just got to attack it like we normally do. Have a really good week of preparation. I think it's 2 really good teams going against each other, and I think that the better prepared team's going to win. So we can't look too far ahead. We can't play the game right now, so we got to do what we can and prepare for them and be ready. When we get out there on Saturday.
Well, speaking of preparation, what stands out to you when you watch the Oregon defense?
I think they got a lot of good players. I think, they got a lot of flash. Some of their guys in the secondary, Jabbar, he's a good player. My buddy Kobe's over there. They got some good transfers that came in. I think some older guys, I think on the defensive front, they're big. They're athletic. I think Birch is playing some really good football. But I'm confident, man. I think, we got some good plans for them. I'm sure they're going to throw some new stuff at us. Coach Lanning does a really good job with that defense. But it's going to be a good challenge, coming off of a game against a really good defense like Iowa. I think that was a good, kind of precursor to this game. But I think we're up for the challenge, man. We're excited. We know it's going to be, a great defense versus a great offense on both sides. So I'm excited for the challenge.
Will, you are new to the Big Ten. I do want to introduce people to you a little bit, get into your background. And I found it interesting that before you were slicing up defenses, you were revolutionizing infant sleep as we know it. Tell me about a baby Merlin's magic sleep suit.
That's a crazy pull right there. That's funny that you figured that out. That's my parents started the Baby Merlin Magic Sleep Suit. It's a baby sleepwear product that actually I used when I was a little kid. I struggled sleeping when I got out of the swaddle, and it's really a swaddle transition product. It kind of looks like a snowsuit. The babies kind of are stuck like that. It muffles or startles and keeps them asleep. let some sleep on their back. So my parents ran that for a while, and they ended up selling it. But I think they might get back into it soon. I don't know. I think they're just itching.
Do you sleep well now?
I sleep great now. I don't know. It must have done something for me. We get asked all the time, like, you guys have adult versions of this, but haven't found that out yet. We're still working on that one.
All right. Well, it trained you. It's the gift that keeps on giving, I suppose.
No doubt.
I have to imagine, on a maybe more serious note, that you lost some sleep your junior year of high school. You were a highly thought of quarterback prospect, and then you broke your wrist your junior year. Tell us about that experience and then what you learned from that going forward.
Yeah, I mean, going into my junior year, I knew it was a really big year for college recruiting, and I was picking up some steam coming off my sophomore year. I had some success, but I felt like I still had more to prove, and going into that junior year, I knew it was big. I started off the season pretty well, ended up playing in our rivalry game and breaking my arm, and I was at that time talking pretty heavily with Penn State, Syracuse, Pitt, some schools around me, but Penn State was the big one, and that was my dream school where I always wanted to go. And after that happened, I kind of stopped hearing from some people, especially Penn State, and it kind of lit a fire under me a little bit, and made me want to come back even stronger my senior year. And we had a really good senior year, and then still to this day, man, I want to prove those people wrong that kind of looked me over when I had that injury. And it was tough, but we made it through.
Well, you certainly did prove them wrong during your time at Kansas State. You set a school record for touchdown passes there in your career. And then you went into the portal, and I know you were talking to USC and Miami and some others in addition to Ohio State. What ultimately swayed you to go to Columbus?
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of great programs I was talking to, but when I started talking to Coach Day and coming to play for the Buckeyes, it really was an opportunity I couldn't turn down. It was, the NFL draft was still a big possibility. I felt like if I found a place where I felt like my skill set could be developed and I could put myself in a position to go higher in the draft and compete for a national championship, that was what I wanted to do. And when I started talking to Ohio State, everything kind of made sense and it added up. And honestly, talking to Coach Day, just the more I talked to him, more comfortable I got, and it all ended up working out, and here we are, man. So I'm really, really blessed to be here and blessed to be a Buckeye.
Well, as you certainly know, and as you probably knew when you were being recruited by Ohio State and ultimately committed, the outside discussion surrounding this program this year, to a certain extent, has been national championship or bust. I certainly think it's beat Michigan, win the Big Ten championship or bust. How have you dealt with that pressure of being in the spotlight?
Yeah, I mean, I knew what I was signing up for. Coming to Ohio State, what the expectations are, and everyone keeps saying that it's natty or bust this year, but I feel like it's that every year. At a place like this where the expectations are so high, and but that's what I wanted, and I wanted that challenge going into the NFL. The stakes are just so much higher, and they get more intense as you go up. And I wanted to put myself in a situation like this to. Pressure's a privilege, man. CJ says that all the time, and being on this stage in this place, it's something that you gotta run with, and you gotta accept and really love. It makes it harder, but it makes it more rewarding in the end.
One thing that I found really interesting was you committed to Ohio State, and obviously Ryan Day has a huge say in this offense, but you committed in early January. They ended up hiring Bill O'Brien as the OC, and then he leaves. So Chip Kelly didn't come until February. So you didn't know who your offensive coordinator was going to be. How have you jibed with Coach Kelly's offense, and what was that interim period like where you weren't really sure who would be kind of overseeing that offensive room?
Yeah, it was confusing at first. I didn't really, I didn't really learn our offensive system, I would say, probably until we went through spring ball. Like, it was kind of a baptism by fire a little bit, just kind of throw it in there and understanding, trying to learn the offense, as I went in the spring. And so it didn't feel like I really settled into the offense until about midway through the spring, or really until the fall. But I thought Coach O'Brien was awesome. Loved Obi. He was great, but he had to make the move that was right for his family. I think everything ended up working out as it was meant to be. God has a plan for everything. And I think Coach Kelly being here has been awesome. The things that he does, especially in the run game, I mean, he's a mastermind. He's a genius. I really like the way that he coaches too, and the way that he teaches. He's very much a teacher, and he wants to develop you as a player and as a person. And I really appreciate the way that he kind of pushes me and tries to develop me. And he and Coach Day obviously have a great relationship and trust each other a lot. So I think just the combination of those two, it's really worked out for us for our offense. And I'm excited to see what Coach Kelly's got up his sleeve the rest of the year.
One of the things I find really interesting in this day and age with as much transferring as goes on, particularly at the quarterback spot where the expectation is that you're a leader, you came into a place where you didn't know the culture. And so what's the balancing act of trying to take over a leadership position in the ultimate position of leadership, I would argue, in all of sport, and yet finding your way through this unfamiliar culture? How did you handle that situation?
Yeah, it's not an easy thing to kind of navigate. Going through it, when I was at Kansas State, I had a guy named Adrian Martinez transfer in my junior year. And he just the way that he went about his transfer, and coming in and being humble, not really trying to, be the alpha guy right away. He kind of sat back, took his time to get to know guys, to get to have relationships with people, and to understand kind of how we ran things. And that's kind of how I tried to emulate my transfer. I wanted to be, that guy that wasn't necessarily coming in and barking right away before people knew me. I wanted to establish relationships with guys. I wanted to know why we were all here. And once we got to that point, I felt like really in the summer was when I kind of settled into my leadership role here. And it's hard. It's not easy to come in and to try and win over a whole team. But I think the way that you go about it is just be yourself, be genuine, and I think if they understand that you care about them, then that means a whole heck of a lot, and your voice will carry a lot further.
Well, I know Adrian quite well from his time at Nebraska, and I would say that's a really good guy to emulate. He is such an impressive
Absolutely.
young guy. I want to ask you a little bit about Jeremiah Smith. I mean, you guys have a ton of talent on your team, and I almost feel bad singling out one player, but man, he is just so amazing for us to watch. Is there a moment or a play that particularly stands out to you, Will, when you think about what Jeremiah can do?
I mean, you can really pick any of them, man. The kid's a stud. He's a mistake eraser out there. He makes me right, and he's just an unbelievable player. The fact that he's 18 doing the things that he's doing, I mean, it's freaky, man. It's he doesn't seem like a freshman at all. You watch him, you talk to him, watch him go about his business. He doesn't go about it like an 18-year-old true freshman. He seems like a vet, and to be able to have that to throw to and to work with every day, man, he's only just scratching the surface of how good he can be, and he's already, I think, one of the best receivers in college football, if not the best. So I mean, he's a stud, man, and I'm excited for him, and he's just continuing to get better every single week, and I think he's got a great mindset about him. He's a great kid, man, and that's the best part about him.
It's pretty nice to have him down in the red zone, as you said. The mistake eraser. You guys have been so good down there in all your red zone trips. 21 of them, you've scored 20 touchdowns this year. That's second best percentage in terms of touchdowns in the nation. You had a field goal in the other red zone trip. Ohio State was 47th in the nation in red zone touchdown percentage last year. It was really an area where they struggled relatively. Aside from having great players, what do you think has been the difference there as you've studied what they did last year and what you guys have done this year?
Yeah, I didn't look much at what they did last year. I didn't even really know how the red zone efficiency was, but that was a big emphasis for us, was just finishing drives, and not leaving any points on the board. Those 4-point plays, on third down in the red zone are huge. And we put a big emphasis on that in the offseason. And I think we've just done a really good job of executing, and I think the O-line's held up. We've ran the ball when we needed to. We've thrown the ball when we needed to. And, receivers. And we've just executed well, and we got to continue to keep that up because it's been a difference maker for us.
Last question for you, Will. As you think about, there's so much preparation that goes into this week, and I know you're looking at every single detail, but I always kind of liken it to, hey, what's on the grease board in the locker room? Like if there are 2 or 3 things that you really need to do on the offensive end to leave Eugene with a win, what would those things be?
That's a good question. We got our, all of our goals for the game and whatnot. But, I think for me, it's, we want to attack them downhill and go after them a little bit in the run game. We want to make sure that we control the noise, and, we know it's going to be loud. We know it'll be a hostile environment, but we can't be overcome by events. We need to make sure that we, just stay on track, stay neutral. And I think a big thing for me is just, staying calm under pressure and being the calm amongst the storm and making sure that everybody can look to me and, not be worried about anything and kind of weather any storms that happen because, we know there's going to be adversity and there's some things that are going to happen that probably we don't want to happen. And they'll make some plays because they're a really good football team. But we got to respond and be able to come back from adversity and make sure that, not too much of it happens and that, we just keep attacking them.
Will Howard, really a pleasure to visit with you. I would encourage you to get lots of good sleep heading into Saturday, but it feels like you've got that area covered. So I'll just say good luck, and we look forward to watching the game.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
USC and Penn State set to meet for the 11th time on Saturday. Two of the most storied programs in the country. You see the resumes, the pedigrees, ton of success. USC, the all-time series lead, including wins in the last 3. Remember, last time they met, January 2nd, 2017, they combined for 101 points. Trojans won a wild one in the Rose Bowl on a walk-off field goal game. Penn State had led by 14 in the fourth quarter. So there's some great history here, Ashley. What interests you about this game on Saturday?
Yeah, I think on the one hand, Dave, you could say that USC's loss to Minnesota, which dropped them out of the top 25, took a little shine off this game. But to me, it actually makes it more intriguing because I think this is a gut check moment for Lincoln Riley and the Trojans. There is, we'll call it, some growing unrest amongst SC fans about what they expected things to look like when Riley took over and the reality of what the results have been. So Lincoln Riley is a phenomenal coach. He has every resource to build USC back to the national power that it was for so long. And in year 3, as you try to announce yourself to the Big Ten, to be 3-2 coming off that tough loss at Minnesota, it's not where anyone in that program wants to be right now. However, you go out and you beat the 4th-ranked and undefeated Penn State Nittany Lions in front of your home fans on Saturday. It won't solve everything, but it gets your season back on track and builds confidence that you still have a ton to play for. So I think the reality of, it would have been great if this was a top 15 matchup or if both teams were undefeated. But I think that adds another element to what's USC going to look like when they come out.
I could not agree with you more. I think that this is a game that I don't know that it erases the 2 previous losses for USC, but it certainly dulls the pain considerably. This would be a marquee win for them. It would be one of those proof of concept games for them. I do think it's fair to ask, were they to lose this game, kind of, hey, is USC really getting better? Are they on the right trajectory? It really started so well with Lincoln Riley. And then after that hot start last year, as everyone who follows them at all knows, it has really deteriorated into essentially right around a 500 program. So this is a huge game if you win it, and it's a game that I think leaves you questioning yourself a little bit if you don't. And I think it's going to be really hard for them to win it because it just feels like the things that Penn State is good at, like we were talking about the matchups in Ohio State and Oregon, and there's no discernible weakness on either side, and it's hard to kind of pit, this is what one team does well and this is what the other does poorly. That's not the case in this game. You've got one team in Penn State that is a really good line of scrimmage team, a really good physical team, and you have another one in USC that just hasn't been this year. And so to me, it's hard to imagine USC winning this game unless they're somehow able to overcome what I think is a pretty significant deficit on both lines of scrimmage.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, Dave. And it's interesting what you said about the Trojans and what it means. I remember Lincoln Riley, after they beat LSU in week 1, he says, you win a game like this and everybody thinks, oh, everything's great. And he said, we will not be defined by the outcome of this game. We will be defined by the progress that we make throughout the course of the season. So this is a huge measuring stick to see, are they getting better? Are they improving? And I think that the D'Anton Lynn element is interesting to me, right? USC's defensive coordinator, he was a cornerback at Penn State. I remember doing a production call with him ahead of the USC spring game, and someone asked about the transition to the Big Ten, and he was fired up. He said, look, if you had told me that one day I would be the D coordinator at USC and we'd be hosting Penn State, I would have never believed you. So he's had this one circled for a while, just as we have. But I think USC's defense is going to have its hands full. Obviously, they are much improved from a year ago.
Yes.
But they have not been staunch enough up front, to your point, and against the run. And we saw what Minnesota was able to do to them. So
And I
think that's going to be a big thing to watch for.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Ash. I do think it's really important to say that. Like, I want to echo what you said because they are better on defense. Like, are they improving? Yes, they are improving. No doubt. But it's USC, right? And the expectations for USC are what we saw coming into this block. The expectations are national championships. And you got to squint really hard to see that with this program right now. But again, the trajectory, certainly on defense, the trajectory is far better. Ashley, I mean, this is a team legitimately that's 2 plays away from being undefeated. We focused a lot on offense, and I do think they're really good there. But to me, the story with Washington has been their defense, and that does not bode well for an Iowa team that's really struggling to score.
Yeah, I mean, I think my big question, Dave, is which version of Washington is going to show up at Iowa? The one that played a hell of a game and beat Michigan, or the one that shot itself in the foot repeatedly and lost to Rutgers and Washington State and heartbreakers? And I got to believe that last week's win over the Wolverines did wonders for their confidence and belief. So now, can you bottle that up and take it on the road where they have not had success yet this season? They're 0-2 away from Husky Stadium. So I think, this game comes down to, yes, can they play that great defense, but how clean can they play? If they have a bunch of turnovers, penalties, missed field goals, it could be a long day at Kinnick.
No doubt. And their schedule is brutal, and obviously going to Iowa is not easy, but you look at 6 games left, 5 of them are against teams that either are ranked right now or have been ranked this year, so it won't be easy. As we talk about the lone conference loss for them to Rutgers, so many opportunities against Nebraska couldn't come through. And then it feels like Wisconsin, I know it's against Purdue, and I know Purdue is really not playing well, but man, that had to infuse some confidence in them, particularly offensively. What are you keying on in this one, Ashley?
Yeah, confidence is a powerful thing, Dave. And yes. I think special teams will be a factor in this one. Rutgers blocked 2 punts last week at Nebraska. The Huskers defense was so good, it ultimately didn't matter to the final outcome. But lost in the conversation about how well Nebraska's defense played was how well Rutgers' defense played. They gave up 14 points. Greg Schiano talked about a huge point of emphasis was tackling, and they did a much better job on that front compared to the Washington game. They only had 2 missed tackles against the Huskers. And Dylan Raiola just never really found his rhythm. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that will continue against the Badgers, whose offense, as you point out, had a big confidence-building game against Purdue last week. I think this is going to be a good one.
Yes, a Wisconsin team who, by the way, Rutgers has never beaten, and the defense is really good. We've talked a lot about the offensive improvement for Rutgers, and I think these last couple games they've taken a step back. So interested to see whether they can get back to playing the way they were those first few games of the season. But certainly a really intriguing game, and one that you can see here. We wrap things up with 4. We are watching for the 4 biggest storylines entering this weekend of football. Ashley, where do you want to start?
I think we got to start with the game that we've been talking about that everyone's had circled for forever. Can Oregon slow down Ohio State's 2-headed monster at running back? Iowa, who has a terrific rush defense, they could not. And you are never going to stop Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson, but can you slow them down and make Will Rogers beat you with his arm? And I think, fun side note in this storyline is that Ohio State's running back coach, Carlos Loughlin, was the running backs coach at Oregon the last 2 years, so he knows this program very well. And to me, Chip Kelly's ability to run the ball at will against his former team will go a long way in determining who wins. Dave, what about you? What do you got your eye on?
Well, I agree with you. First of all, I think that's the biggest story in the game because we said earlier, I'm not sure there's a perceived obvious weakness. If you look at what Ashton Jeanty did against Oregon, I think that would be the biggest concern. I understand he may win the Heisman Trophy, but these guys aren't far behind, Henderson and Judkins. So I agree. I think that's the biggest story, whether or not Oregon can stop that run game. I think the quarterbacks are interesting as well, just in that obviously quarterback's the marquee position in the sport. I don't think either one of them is going to be counted on to win the game. But I think Dylan Gabriel and Will Howard have to make sure that they take care of the ball. We've seen Dylan Gabriel throw some red zone interceptions, 3 of them in the last 2 weeks. We've seen Will Howard a few times be careless with the ball. I think it's really important that you don't give the opponent a short field here. The defenses are so good. So punt the ball away and live to get your defense onto the field and see that be the way that you succeed in the game. Number 2 for me is Illinois coming out of the bye. I think there's a lot of talk about Indiana as an upstart, deservedly so, Rutgers as well. I think Illinois could be a great story. They only have 1 game left on their schedule that's truly daunting. That's the one at Oregon. Can they stay in that playoff conversation? It's not totally out of the question. I'm fascinated to see how they do against a Purdue team that is reeling, and can they send a message that they need to be taken seriously heading into that game against Michigan next week. How about for you, Ashley? Second one.
Yeah, well, you bring up Michigan, and I think I'll go a little bit outside the box here because we won't be able to actually watch it this week. But I want to know what this week is like in Ann Arbor within those walls of the football facility during their bye week, because you're coming off that tough loss to Washington in which you went to your 3rd quarterback, and Jack Tuttle provided a spark, but ultimately it wasn't enough. So I'm interested to know the culture that has been built up in that program. These are the moments when culture shows up. Can you stay connected when things are not going according to plan? And we won't know until a couple weeks later who the quarterback is when they take on Illinois the following week.
I'm with you. They got to figure out the defense too, Ashley. I mean, they led the nation in total defense last year, led the nation. They're 14th in the Big Ten this year. So quarterback is a huge story. It's the biggest story, no doubt. But there's a lot they got to get figured out in Schembechler Hall this week. That is for sure. Always fun, Ashley. Safe travels. We'll see you here on Saturday.